Should you buy the Kemper in 2024? Is it outdated, or should you buy something else? As a longtime Kemper user, I still think this is a super relevant unit, even in 2024. With that said, I've got a ton of Kemper content on my channel, so whether you're looking at the rack, the head, or the stage, be sure to subscribe, and let's dive in. First and foremost, if you're looking at the Kemper, you should know that it is not a digital modeler. It is a profiler. A modeler is going to be a unit like the Helix or the Fractal ecosystem, which is going to have a processor that is going to emulate the way that it thinks an amp will respond, given different microphones, cabinets, microphone settings, speakers, etc. It's going to give you a lot of individual control, and you're going to be able to tweak that based off how you want that specific model to sound. Versus the Kemper is going to be truer and closer to something like the capture process from the Quad Cortex, from Tonex, or Kemper has their own proprietary profiling process, which is basically going to be a sonic fingerprint of the way an amp sounds at that exact moment when it was recorded by the curator, profiler, or in this case, could be yourself. Now, the reason I think that is an important distinction to make is because the Kemper profiling process gives you, in my opinion, a better response and feel compared to a modeler. Now, I know the Fractal system is spectacular and sounds amazing. I've not personally tried it myself. However, I've used the Helix for years, and I do think that the Kemper feels better in terms of the amp tone and response. And I actually did a poll on Facebook last year in a Kemper group with about 20,000 users and asked them what their top reasons for using the Kemper was, overwhelmingly because of the amp feel and response. And I think that is the Kemper's #1 strong suit, is it sounds and feels much like a real amp. And as somebody that came from a previous world where I had a pedal board and an amp and lugged that around with me for years, I do think that the transition from that solid state or analog world to the digital world with the Kemper was a pretty easy transition. Of course, there's going to be learning curves and there's going to be a lot of information you have to learn when switching from a pedal board and amp platform to digital, but I think the Kemper feels a lot like a real amp. So if you are a tone purist and you want something that's going to be lighter on your back, easier to carry around with gigs, and honestly something that's a lot easier to record with, there's a plethora of pros with going digital and using the Kemper even today. Now, one thing that I think is very crucial to the Kemper sounding good is having good profiles. And if you are not somebody that is interested in profiling your own amps, there are a ton of people out there that offer free profiles. For instance, Alter Ampworks, Tone Junkie, Selah Sounds. There is a whole slew of other people, Michael Britt, that make free and fantastic profiles. They also have paid profiles that you can download, and those are really good starting points. There's a bit of a learning curve in terms of profiling your own amps. It is not as easy as just putting your microphone in front of your amp and getting an amazing capture. And so in this case, you can rely on people that have already done it for you and get those spectacular amp sounds. Now, I think we need to answer another question, and that's around, is this technology outdated? There's other companies like Quad Cortex, Tonex that have come out with more recent capture devices, and if the technology sucks and it's hard to navigate or use, does any of this really matter? So let's talk about it. Still watching this far in the video, be sure to subscribe. It seriously lets me know what content people enjoy. I've got more Kemper content on this channel, so hopefully gets you started on the right foot if you buy a Kemper. Now, I think for many of us, myself included, typically go digital for a few different reasons. Either we want something that sounds great at low volume, we can plug in headphones, we want to be able to easily record, we want something that's easier to haul around than a traditional tube amp and pedal board setup. And thankfully, I think the Kemper scratches all of these boxes, or checks all of these boxes. Now, of course, if you are looking at the rack unit, this is probably one of the least portable options out there. Of course, they make enclosures where you can haul it between gigs, but I think for most people in a live setting are either using the stage or the head. And because this technology is a little bit older, it's really easy to find either used units online for a little bit cheaper. If you want to get the unpowered version, the powered version, the stage, you can find it on Reverb from around $1,000-ish bucks. Also, one huge upgrade that Kemper did this last year via firmware updates was give us the ability to record via USB cable. They've also updated their effects, their overdrives, and delays since I've owned the unit. And one thing that I've always appreciated about Kemper is although they are not the flashiest, they're not the newest in the market, they are consistent in bringing value even to a unit that's 12 plus years old even today. And that brings up something I want to talk about a little bit more. We've addressed the amp feel, we've talked about the portability, but I want to talk about the effects and some of the pros and the cons to having a true all-in-one unit. As the old saying goes, jack of all trades, master of none. And I think the problem that we run into with all-in-one units is oftentimes there's areas where they excel and then there is areas where they fall short. And in my opinion, I think the Kemper does a pretty spectacular job being well-rounded. As somebody that used just solely my Kemper as my all-in-one unit between my amps and my effects, my overdrives, for about 3.5 years, I felt like I had some of the best amp tones I've ever had. My presets that I created or the ones that I purchased from third parties were really spectacular, and using them both in a live setting or a worship setting, I didn't really feel like I was lacking anything. Now, one thing that I do think Kemper has done a great job at is improving their overdrives and giving us more options there. And I think there's some people that will find if you want to run dual stereo amps, you're going to be limited with the Kemper. And that's probably one of the biggest drawbacks, I think, is really today the processing power as compared to other units is going to fall short. In this case, you are locked into 8 effects blocks, 4 before your amp and 4 post, and then you are limited to just running 1 amp at a time. Now, of course, people have profiled amps together, but that means you're always going to be running your amp in mono from the Kemper. And of course, using a more modern unit like the Helix, the Fractal, having dual tone X's or the Quad Cortex does give you the ability to run stereo amps. And if that matters for you, you can either buy 2 Kempers or wait for Kemper 2.0. And as somebody that has tried a lot of other units and has also used the Helix for years, I think Kemper's dry effects, like their overdrives, distortions, fuzz pedals, respond better to hitting the profiles than the Helix does. However, I feel like Helix has better wet effects. They're more ambient, they're a little more lush, they feel more expansive. But with all that said, we're really splitting hairs at this point. It sounds amazing, and if you're just looking for an awesome all-in-one unit, you will not be disappointed with the Kemper. Now, there's one more thing that the Kemper was lacking for a really long time, and I think is worth knowing if you're looking to buy it today. I think this is an aspect that often gets overlooked, but the ease of use with the Kemper is pretty straightforward. Of course, there is definitely a learning curve when you're trying to go from an analog world to a digital world. However, the signal chain on the Kemper is very linear. It's very left to right. Everything you have pre and post amp, and it's pretty easy to start to figure out once you get used to it. Now, of course, there's new definitions of things that you need to figure out, like what does the clarity mean? What is definition? When you go to input trim, how does that actually impact your profile, etc. However, I do think the Kemper is a pretty intuitive unit, and it may just take a little figuring out. But then there's also the desktop editor, which Kemper did not have for years and came out, I would say, 3-ish, 4 years ago, and is a really helpful tool, especially if you're not someone that wants to be on the ground playing and adjusting your individual knobs. The desktop editor does give you the ability to go in and tweak your profiles and performances in a much more visual way. Now, I'd say Kemper's overall editor experience is probably like a 90-ish%. For the most part, it's amazing. I don't ever have issues with it, but sometimes it's clunky, sometimes it crashes on me. And from the many other videos I've made, not everybody has had this same experience. Most people say it's amazing and they love it. So keep that in mind. There are better editors out there, but Kemper's is still really solid. So I hope you guys found this video really helpful. Be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.